Hey guys, going to record another video here, and it's going to be about SCT again. So this time I'd like to elaborate my thoughts a little bit, what I've been thinking about SCT and sensory processing. And after having thought about this a little bit, I've come to the conclusion that it's a pretty big deal, sensory integration. And really is maybe one of the 2 or 3 core things defining SCT overall. So SCT, it's partly a result of not being good at just processing senses in general, integrating senses to a comprehensive picture or understanding in the mind, which could be used to draw conclusions from, right? So you might see stuff, but you're not quite as able to understand it. Really, that's it. It's something that's really a variable type of symptom, variable type of problem, right? And I think this is why why partly SCT is environmental, and why it's such a why there can be such huge amount of insight and how to recover from it. So it might sound a bit big at the moment, but let me elaborate. So sensory problems, sensory integration problems, these are not kind of static problems, right? So what you may notice that sometimes you have much less issue with these, right? And other times it can feel like, mild form of Asperger's or, autism or whatever. And the reason behind this, why the sensory integration problems of SCT vary is that it's almost like there's a dynamic there, right? So, and this is all psychological, and it's also, hypothesis I'm going to make here is that, there's a duality effect here, duality kind of dynamic at play, where where your sensory integration problems get more severe, you tend to talk less, right? And you're less in a mood to kind of verbally express yourself. And on the opposite side, when you have less sensory integration problems, you tend to be more verbose, writing more, expressing yourself more socially, more interested, more open, and so on. So it's not a static type of symptom. This is a dynamic, like mentioned. It's kind of inverse of your verbosity. So when you're more verbose or expressive in your day-to-day interactions, there's less sensory integration problems. So I'm not completely sure why it works like that. I would assume that there's a psychological mechanism by which if you're more kind of expressive, you're psychologically less busy with understanding what's going on in the environment. So that's kind of an abstract line of reasoning, but I think that makes sense, why it works. And this is, more... it's all about really expressing yourself, and this is where the environment comes in. So people who have more of a troubled childhood, which kind of instills a sense of low sense of esteem, that can drive a person into SCT, because that drives that person to a dynamic where they are less verbose, right? So then they end up just talking less, and by the result of that, they're more exposed to their sensory integration, because that's the kind of the opposite thing. Either you're talking or you're kind of outputting using your sensors, which is not that difficult with SCT, or you're kind of inputting or listening and trying to understand what's going on, which is difficult. Right. So this is where sensory integration, naturally speaking, it puts you into a position where you have to be kind of person outputting, right? Verbalizing. This is why I think also verbal intelligence and just practicing and making yourself more verbose and able to get point across in conversation and discussions is so important, because that's really the key reason key method of overcoming these limitations, right? And putting yourself into a position where you don't have to struggle so much with your sensory integration issues, but you can kind of bypass them by being in that role of kind of handing out the work, or handing out discussion points or whatever, right? So yeah, that's really the core way to recover from SCT. And so this kind of mechanism, it's really important to understand it. Repeating myself a little bit, but I mean, really the core dynamic, verbal expressiveness versus sensory integration issues. So again, I think this is hypothetical, but I think this makes sense from the point of view of purely experience. And I think if you think about your own experiences, and I might be wrong here, it might just be me, but this kind of scenario, it tends to kind of play itself out. At least I found it. When there's perhaps in the morning or something of a given day, if there's more of an opportunity to kind of present yourself, the SCT type symptomology, the stuff written down by expressed by Russell Barkley in his presentation, those kind of things tend to be less pronounced. There is a tendency that you tend to do better. Again, that's it's kind of the inverse relationship between verbosity and sensory integration issues. And the kind of the switch that kind of flips a person to the bad side of the equation and to the side of sensory integration is those childhood problems. So again, people who don't have childhood problems don't end up developing SCT because they don't get put on the wrong side of the equation, so to say, wrong side of the dynamic. So that's my thoughts. I think that's kind of an abstract or big picture or psychological model, if you want to put it that way, of how SCT works and why it happens in the first place. And I think this is a really useful way to start dealing with it. Certainly, this has been a kind of an exploratory journey for myself, and I found things tend to improve, but it takes big steps and getting out of your comfort zone a lot. Because if you're put in a bad position through childhood or over the course of childhood, it's not easy to recover. But I think there is some feasibility to make that kind of the jump. It's just a pretty big jump. Anyway, thanks for listening, and again, would appreciate to hear any kind of comments, feedback, all that kind of stuff. So leave any comments, please, and what are your thoughts of why SCT happens and also how to recover from it. Thanks. Cheers.